Welcome to Breakfast with Birch and Bat, a conversational podcast about tabletop RPGs.
And anything else we want.
With your hosts, me, Arella.
And me, Kyle.
Good morning.
Oh, man, it's exciting. It's episode 2.
It is episode 2.
Good morning, and welcome to Breakfast with Birch and Bat.
It is nice to have all of you here with us today. We are going to be covering a topic I'm actually very excited about.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to be talking about D&D settings we have made.
Yeah, this is the stuff that we've created over the years and things that that we've used in our own games and stuff.
I think it's going to be quite interesting because I don't think I know half the ones that you have done.
I've made so many campaigns. I've run a lot of D&D and a lot of other games.
I've technically only made one campaign, like custom campaign world. Mm-hmm. But I feel like you're far more creative than I am when it comes to that kind of stuff.
Well, I don't know if I agree with that, but I think I probably have a bunch of settings that I've used for maybe 3 or 4 sessions, and then things have been like, oh, let's play this over here instead. How long did your sort of world last for?
Well, I've used that world a lot.
Okay.
So I've reused it, but it's always the same world. But the longest one I ran was about 28 sessions.
Damn, that's pretty good.
Yeah, it got a good feel. And this is, some of them were live play games, some of them were online, things like that. So it varied, but I've always used the same world.
Yeah.
You tend to be the boy with all the ideas.
I have so many different worlds that I get excited about. I'm like, oh, let's play over here. And it's like, what about this other world? It's gone now.
I'm very much the beat it until the ground until it's dead person.
Yeah, I'm trying to get that way.
It's not a healthy place to be, Kyle. I can't expand. I'm too caught up on my couple of bullshit things that I'm into,
It's all good. One thing I would also say we can include, because I know I've got a handful of them, we could also include settings like other published settings that we've adapted or altered or made our own.
That's where I live.
Yeah.
That's my world.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to start off because you have the most.
Okay.
I want to start off with at least a couple of yours. So which one? I want to know which one you fleshed out the most. Do you think?
Fleshed out the most?
Yeah.
Ooh. The one I think I lived in the most and fleshed out the most was in probably the mid-aughts. It was probably around 2013, 2014 I started.
Okay.
D&D Next was just starting to be a thing. So 5th edition hadn't quite come out yet. Mm-hmm. When that was out, I made sort of a homebrew D&D kind of game using D&D Next, and I needed a world for it. I made a sort of pastiche generic fantasy world. I believe the main country that it was set in, it was vaguely Canada shaped.
Cool.
Because I used the middle of Canada and northern Canada as sort of an inspiration for geography. Mm-hmm. The country was called Remlia. Mm-hmm. It was a sort of magical divine monarchy place with a very young princess in charge. I think because my players were super into Game of Thrones at the time, that was sort of the vibe of the world that they wanted.
Gotcha.
But this being me, and Frozen had just come out, so I was super high on princesses and stuff. So that, if you can imagine a mashup of Game of Thrones and say Frozen, that was kind of the world.
Gotcha. I think that paints a really good picture because I know you for so long that as you're describing this, I could see how Kyle would have meshed those two things together because I don't think I could have.
Mm-hmm. But there was a main kingdom and a main country that all the characters are adventuring in. There were a handful of towns around some wilderness and one big city called Gran Remlia. Gran Remlia was a... Okay, here we go. It was a sort of castle city built into a mountain that was in a very small island that was in the middle of a large lake, sort of like a Lake Superior or Lake Ontario size lake. Yeah. That was sort of smack dab in the middle of the rest of the country.
Cool.
The city itself looked like they used a lot of log flumes for sort of public transportation, so it had a very Matterhorn, sort of Splash Mountain kind of vibe.
Very cool.
A lot of spires, a lot of things. Very sort of diverse population of people. People generally, sort of well-to-do. Then to the south, there was a nation, an elven majocracy as I believe it is called, just evil elves ruled by magic and stuff. There's a northern territories that were surrounded by like dense woodlands and sort of magical monsters and stuff. And my players ventured in and around there for a good few years.
That's a long time.
Yeah, no, I think that's the longest running 5th edition campaign I've run, other than, say, our game at home.
Right. So it was like a lot of mountainous winter landscape things in there for them to go through. That's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. There was an Ice Queen that was eventually the sort of main villain for a while. So like winter was sort of encroaching because she was sort of bringing that further and further down south towards them.
Neat.
Yeah. Again, as like a generic fantasy setting, like there's a bunch of like Forgotten Realmsian kind of stuff in there, a bunch of just scattered things from different kinds of fantasy inspiration.
Again, you're far more creative with these kinds of things. Like, I could listen to you talk about all the different concepts and worlds you've created.
I think I just have like not too many filters over my ideas and stuff. I'm just like, I'm gonna put this in here. Oh, that was a fun time out of that movie. That goes into this setting right over here.
I feel like every week you come to me and you're like, I'm gonna run this game. I came up with this game, and I'm like, that's a great idea, honey. You don't have time to run 18 games a week.
No, I have, like, at my most, I run maybe, like, 3 or 4 games a week at my sort of peak, and it's, like, I got more ideas than I got time for.
And your ideas are usually very good.
Aw, thanks.
I mean it.
You're really sweet.
Your ideas are very good. I would say, see, that's the thing, I'm trying to, because my world I created doesn't feel creative to me.
How so?
It's... Because you're talking about, like, this high fantasy kind of adventure, and I could see D&D characters going into that world and having so much fun and exploring so much. Mine was... tend to keep mine, like, very small townish.
Mm-hmm. That's what I love about your settings, though. Like, you go modest, and then you fill it with so much detail and so much, like... It feels like a real world.
You're very sweet. The one that I've run... This thing, it doesn't have an official name, because every time I'd run it, I'd change the name so people wouldn't realize I'd reused it. So anyone who's ever played one of my games, and they're like, oh my god, Arella, this is so great and original. Yeah.
You use what you have, and you refine it, and you make it better over time. That's totally legit.
It was me refining it over time, yeah. As like, I would run a group of adventurers through it, and be like, oh, that's broken. Oh, I need to fix that. Oh, that didn't go smoothly. And then the next time I ran it, that would be changed. Mm-hmm. But the baseline of it is very Louisiana Bayou.
Oh, nice.
I stuck it all on like the southern coastline of a place right against the Gulf Coast, heavily inspired by that area. There's deep like marshes and like lagoons and things to go and explore. A lot of, not jungle, but close to it, marshlands. A lot of witches, like a lot of... I made my own version of voodoo for it, and it was what the witches, not bad witches, but like good, as a practicing witch, I'm not going to shame my own people.
Right. Yeah.
But like, so when they came into witches, they had to get over their own D&D bias saying that all witches are bad.
Gotcha.
Because these witches were actually going to help them. There was a very large town, large as in 100 people in it, and then everything else was like little hamlets that they visited. Cool. A lot of agriculture, but almost all of it was magic forces coming up against each other, like the ancient magic of the land trying to retake what the invading forces had taken from them. So that's humans really cool. Weren't native there. Like this had all been like witch territory. And I had it be a lot of like not just humans but dwarves and halflings and things like that swooped in from the north. There was a kingdom up to the north where they all mostly came from, and they were expanding their kingdom down.
I see. And
they took over the marshlands and didn't necessarily care that there were already people there because they didn't kind of align with their views. And so you pick the side. Do you want to reinstate nature in the natural process of things, or are you very much pro the future revolution of, of the people.
Gotcha. That's really cool.
Or, I guess, nature versus industry. Mm-hmm. Every group ran it differently. I had a group that came in there and sided with industry. And they were like, witches, fuck off. And the whole coastline became hotels, and like it was like the whole thing.
God.
That devastated me to run.
I'm so sorry.
Because as a witch, I'm looking at this like, no, that's the bad. You're doing the bad thing.
You don't side with the empire. You don't side with the colonizer. You don't do that. It's simply not done.
However, there was a balance. Ideally, to win the game, you had to come up with a balance. Mm-hmm. You can have both. You can have the respect for nature, but also knowing that these people need a place to live, and you can work in harmony with each other. And if you fostered that harmony, things would eventually get better. The magic would be restored. Everything would vibe and be great. Mm-hmm. Never had anyone do that.
No, I've noticed that's a recurring theme in a lot of your games and a lot of your campaigns. Is two or more opposing sides, and having there be an implicit understanding that finding a harmony between all of them is ultimately the sort of like the best result of a lot of the things that can happen.
Ideally, in any game that I run, it doesn't matter what they're fighting over. If they're fighting over a religious thing, if they're fighting over a political thing, land, values, whatever it is, at the end of the day, everyone has the same thing in mind. They are protecting themselves and their families. Mm-hmm. And as soon as they can get to that base level understanding of, oh wait, you too just want to be safe and thriving, mm-hmm. then you can kind of start making some movements. It's an ideal world kind of situation.
Yeah.
But I guess, like, not to get political, but in today's political climate, that's, like, lacking in a lot of ways, and a lot of people see it as fantasy. Mm. The fantasy that you could bring people together.
Yeah, that there can be a harmony and there can be a peace between very different types of people and very different viewpoints.
However, most of my players, and I love you all, I love you all dearly if you've played in this game, there's been a couple who've wanted to do that. Mm-hmm. But the overall group has pressed that, no, there's only right and wrong.
Yeah, there's, especially Dungeons and Dragons, it trades a lot, and a lot of that good versus evil, and like, there is a big bad evil guy out there somewhere, and we must smash them. Like, I am absolutely guilty of that, because that tends to be my go-to mm-hmm. when I make campaign worlds, is like, okay, here is a landscape, here are a bunch of peoples and towns and settlements and other stuff, and here's some asshole over here who's bad and wants bad things.
See, I'm actually envious of that you can do that, because in my head I humanize everyone too much.
No, I'm totally guilty of that too, because like the earlier setting that I talked about and everything, that evil ice queen and everything, she wasn't evil at all.
No.
Like, it was very Hans Christian Andersen's inspired, and it was very much about, like, no, she was acting on behalf of a people that were ousted from the land to begin with. Mm-hmm. By the time my players got to her, and they had uncovered all this information and discovered, oh, there's a lot more to this. This goes way deeper than we had imagined, and now we're suddenly learning a lot of things. What do we do? We've been wanting to get rid of this person for at least a dozen sessions or so, and in the end they were just like, we don't really know what to do, so we're gonna it's simpler if we just get rid of them.
I see.
Because like,
it tends to be how it goes.
Maybe it's a growing up with like Disney musicals kind of thing, but like, I humanize my villains way too much. I love them, and I understand where they're coming from and what they're trying to accomplish a lot of the time, unless they're like really big scumbags.
But I don't write, I have the same thing, but I don't write really big scumbags.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever had a villain that is like exterminating an entire populace kind of evil.
Yeah. Like, I tend to go either like somewhat sympathetic villain acting out of things that the players will eventually understand, or they're kind of like a cackling Skeletor goofball who's like trying to do bad, but like they're not that bad.
Trying to do bad, but accidentally does good and gets mad about it.
Yeah. That's, God, I've run that so many times.
That's my favorite.
Yeah. If again, by like episode 50, if they're not like arm in arm with the main villain and everything, fighting against like a worse evil type thing, I'm not doing it right.
Yeah. For me, I tend to write ignorance. Mm. The villain is the villain because of ignorance. If the players come in and help them learn, or open their eyes, not even help them learn, but open their eyes to something that they were previously ignorant towards, usually it starts to sway things.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Everyone's ignorant. The players come in ignorant of the situation. The people in the town are ignorant of the forest people. The forest people are ignorant of how the village people work. Everyone is ignorant of each other and making assumptions the whole time of how each other think and believe and work, and as the players do. It's like a whole game of player characters. Which is sometimes very bad.
Yeah. I can imagine, like, because that's really cool. I can imagine that can, especially if you're not used to that, because like, I imagine a lot of people who playing D&D, like myself included, because I've played in a couple of your games where that's been present, and it trips you up at first. Because
you're expecting someone to be bad.
Yeah.
People search for the villain. And then when I keep telling them, like, I have like this upfront notice on all my games, like, you are entering into gray area game where everything is gray and nothing is black and white. And people come into my games and go, where's the black and white?
Yeah.
I'm like, it doesn't exist, honey.
No. I mean, that's why you're such a big fan of Ravenloft as
well.
well.
My God, yeah. Yeah.
Because that's, in a gothic setting, that's kind of what it's all about.
Everyone's got a little bit of darkness in their soul. Mm-hmm. But everyone also has the capacity to do something decent. Mm-hmm. I love it. It's
overcoming your own sort of sins and your own shortcomings and things.
Yeah.
Very cool.
I love it. But that's, I think, the most dramatic thing I've ever done in any of my, in that campaign in particular, was having the leader of, the time would have been the leader of the halflings. He technically led the halflings, but the dwarves had kind of joined in because they wanted to expand as well. Mm-hmm. The leader of the halflings was, he called himself a king, and he said that spider parts were banned.
Huh.
Spider parts are a major component of a lot of the witchcraft down there.
I see.
So in order to starve out the witches, he was trying to cut off any harvesting of spider parts, drive actual spiders out of the land. Mm-hmm. The only Forgotten Realms thing I added to my game was the fact that Lolth was none too happy about that.
If you have a god that is devoted to spiders, like, yeah.
She was kind of pissed about all that shit. And especially when she found out the spiders are just being mass exterminated.
Yeah,
she was not happy. I had one entire game where Lolth didn't show her hand. I'm gonna spoil it. I'm trying to dive around spoilers just in case I run it again. I'm not going to.
No, go for it.
So, the queen, who is this beautiful elven woman at the side of the king, is actually Lolth in disguise. She's trying to undermine what he's doing. So the more that the players interact with the royal couple, the more that the queen is like taking a shining to these people and be like, I could use this. I could do. Maybe you all could help me. Mm-hmm. But she doesn't show she's Lolth until somebody dies. I wait for a player to die before I show my hand. You can get hints from spider shit around her, or like hidden things on her.
If you're paying attention.
If you're really digging, you can find it. But if a player dies, suddenly they see the queen approach their dying body. But no one else can see her, only them. And she offers them a deal.
Oh, that's my favorite.
You work for me. I give you powers beyond comprehension. And then I make them roll on a freaking table. You know I make tables, Kyle.
Oh, yeah.
You know I make tables.
That's what I love about your games.
And you roll on a table, and it gives you a random spider power.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Maybe you grow extra legs or extra eyes, and you can see certain things. Maybe you shoot web like Spider-Man. Mm-hmm. Maybe you get a giant spider mount you can add a wing. That's
pretty good.
I had an Olympic-style event where everyone could compete in a trial of feats. Mm-hmm. 4 players died during it.
Oh,
because they just kept being like, it's fine, it's just the Olympics. And I'm like, it's Death Olympics, you can't fucking do that.
You can't go into death-defying things. Like, it's fine, it's just the Olympics.
The Olympics don't kill anybody. I'm like, have you seen the Olympics in the last 20 years? Sometimes it does. Like, but 4 of them died. And that was when she showed her hand. She showed the first one. He was doing a running race, and there was all these things he had to dodge, like spike traps and shit, and he died on one. And she's like, join me. And he's like, okay, cool, hot lady. I'm good with that.
And then that proceeded to happen 3 more times?
Well, here's the thing. Then he crawled out of the pit of spikes he fell into, completely unharmed, with 8 legs, and he just fucking tore off. And decided to finish the race like that, knowing he had extra legs. And his companions are staring in horror of like, what the fuck just happened?
Yeah.
Couldn't talk to him. The next diving relay happened with the water trap. Next one died in the water trap. Knowing that their friend just sprouted 8 legs, the spider goddess visited them. And said, join me. And they look across. This was a live play session. They look across the table at the guy who's grinning from ear to ear at his new spider powers, handed him an index card with the spider powers on it. He's reading it and grinning. And she looks over at him and goes, is this good? He's like, I think it's cool. Hey, she looks at me and goes, she takes the deal. And I'm like, okay, cool. She launches out of the water with a giant spider she's riding. And then the next one dies on the mountain trap. They're falling like crazy. Mm-hmm. By the end of it, the whole party was Lolth followers.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. By the end of it, was Lolth just showing and be like, oh, okay, so I guess I'm going for the hat trick here. So everyone else has joined up. You want to get in on that peer pressure?
I got every one of them.
That's amazing.
It was so fun. Because I just, as the DM, I'm sitting there like, I figured hell would break loose. I figured hell would break loose as soon as they realized the spider thing happened in the first one. Mm-hmm. And instead, they're all like, cool!
Oh, yeah, no. So I know this from my own games, is that when a player character dies, mm-hmm. the best thing you can do is offer them that one-time reprieve of, like, a supernatural creature appears before them, offers to bring them back to life, either at a cost or at, like, hey, I will offer you this power if you do this for me.
It is my favorite.
They take it every time.
They do.
I have never had a player who didn't sort of go along with that and be like, well, okay. It's like, wait, were they evil? Was this an evil god thing? I guess we'll solve that later on. I
think I might... We're going to talk a little bit more about one of your other campaigns you've mm-hmm. done. But I think after that, I might touch on another one I've done where that's the core of the whole game.
That's fantastic.
You said something about changing up existing worlds.
Yeah. So I've run a lot of published settings, but I end up sort of running like my version of them. Mm-hmm. Like currently, I'm running a Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus campaign.
Right.
I run the Forgotten Realms very differently than I think a lot of other people, or maybe it's very similar to what people do. I kind of take the piss out of it because it's such a large world and there's so much there, and it has such a sort of like this long-lasting generic fantasy kind of appeal. Like, it takes itself incredibly seriously on the surface level, and it's not hard to kind of poke fun at it.
Yeah.
So whenever I run the Forgotten Realms, I do that. Like, I've fleshed out a couple of areas in there, like the islands around Mintarn, just sort of like a pirate island kind of setting across the Sword Coast. I fleshed that out for a campaign a while back. And yeah, it's basically like a Tortuga-style Pirates of the Caribbean island. It's ruled by like a pirate child queen.
Cool.
It's such a good setting. Oh my god, that was some fun. I got to do a lot of testing of early Weird on the Wave stuff in that game.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yeah, because like across from them, there's the Isle of Scatarack, where there's a giant red dragon that's sort of like the rest of the islands offer a monthly tribute to him. Mm-hmm. And like recently he ate the previous queen of Mintarn.
Oops.
And then suddenly demanded, well, there's this cult of the dragon over here getting all kinds of money. Why aren't my tithes increasing?
Yeah.
But like I also like putting a lot of sort of modern and anachronistic things in my games. Like, in my Descent into Avernus game, there are vending machines. Because of course there are. But they're vending machines, they're wooden, they have very large push buttons, and they're operated by fairies. So like inside these machines, you push a button, you put in your gold pieces or whatever, and there's a series of fairies inside that begin to like brew and create drinks and then contain it inside like a container and then roll it on out to the final trap.
I love it.
Like where it's sort of collected. And of course, when I introduced the concept of vending machines to my players, one player decided, I put 24 gold pieces into it.
Oh, shit.
So they're waiting at a vending machine for about 15 minutes. Finally, a fairy emerges out the bottom, and it's like, it's going to take a little while longer, sweetie. We're not used to getting this many orders at once. And, like, just stuff like that.
That's fun.
Like, I have the main inn that they were in, the Elf Song Tavern. I decided I wanted to have a combat encounter with a bunch of, like, sort of Chuck E. Cheese animatronic type things. So it became the Elf Song Tavern and Pizzeria, because if I'm running a game, there's going to be pizza in it. There's going to be some kinds of modern food, because why not?
I love that.
But, like, that's, like, usually when I run games like that, when I'm running a public setting, I kind of poke fun at it.
Right.
I sort of, like, exaggerate things a little bit for some goofs, because why not? I think that's a lot of fun. Mostly because, like, when you run a public setting sort of self-seriously a lot, especially stuff like the Forgotten Realms, where it is very sort of even keel and very generic fantasy.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good room for that.
There is, yeah. I'm so envious of your ability to do silly things like that. Like, I would never think, personally, like, when I'm writing, I never think to put something like a vending machine or a pizzeria or think that.
A lot of it actually happens sort of spur of the moment.
Really?
Like, oh, yeah. Like, that vending machine thing, it's players just ask, like, oh, I want to buy a drink on the way. So in the next, like, basically 30 seconds, I was like, okay, how does that work? Someone joked about a vending machine, and I'm like, yeah, no, it's totally there. And then the rest of it was completely off the cuff.
It's your improv. That's your improv ability.
If my players laugh at something, or if they seem to be fixated on an idea or something, instead of ignoring it, I usually run with it, and I usually suddenly incorporate that into the game.
That's what makes you a good person, Kyle. I do the same, but off of fear.
Yes, you do. You're very good at running horror.
It's not even just horror. I run the last 5 minutes of a CW episode drama where it's a cliffhanger. Mm-hmm. That's my bread and butter. That's where I get my energy. I derive energy from it like a succubus, you know? And watching you play, I love it. And I'm so jealous of it because you have so much fun. But on the other hand, I'm grinning ear to ear when I hear my players go, oh no.
Oh yeah, no, that kind of stuff is amazing. Like, as soon as you notice your players fixate or gravitate towards something.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, our go-to is usually to take that and be like, that's important. Mm-hmm. Let's use that, either for them or against them.
Absolutely.
Because, yeah, I've done that with villains, too, where they suddenly have, like, a sudden theory of, like, oh, I wonder about this. Like, just take some notes. If they're really liking that, or even if, like, if that's better than what you wrote. Because, like, there are sometimes I've prepped a session and been like, yeah, generic thing here. Bad guy does this.
Oh, yeah.
Stuff like that. And if my players come up with a better idea, I'm going to use that.
Oh,
because
same.
they're jiving on it.
Yeah.
I want to make sure they're rewarded for
I want to,
that.
like, include their story plot that they've come up with into this. Like, if their story plot works better for the group, that's mainly my issue. Mm-hmm. Is making sure it works best for the group.
Yeah.
If what I've written isn't jiving with the entire group, but something that somebody else's is like an ongoing joke they've made, I will thread that.
Absolutely.
Throughout the entire thing, just so they can have a little bit more enjoyment and feel like they impacted the world.
Yeah, that's important.
Yeah.
Because, like, I know a lot of other games trade a lot in, like, collaborative world building, but it's very sort of structured in how they do that. And I've always found that kind of stifling.
Yeah.
Or rather, it's as if you come to your group and it's like, okay, be creative on the spot now. Come up with this. Yeah. And, like, I freeze up. But, like, if they're doing it off the cuff and naturally, because, like, everyone's relaxed and having a good time, that's when you get some good stuff.
I don't think we ever have any relaxed good times in my games, Kyle.
No, you run a lot of Ravenloft.
I run Ravenloft.
Some very tense and spooky times.
No, that's not true, because I have carousing.
Yeah, but that's not anything.
No, that's where I get most of my storylines from, though.
That's true.
I make the carousing tables. I'm going to quickly do a promo as if we have an ad sponsor or something. Sponsored by Birch and Bat. We have an entire PDF for free available on birchandbat.com of these carousing tables I've made. I use those carousing tables in my games. And every session that they decide to drink, which, by the way, is most sessions for every party.
Yeah.
They roll on the D100 table of whatever table I'm using. Mm-hmm. I take the outcomes from that, and it directly influences the game.
Oh, yeah. I can attest, I've rolled on these tables a lot in your games. They always generate really, really interesting story beats.
Yeah.
Also, I currently run a big dungeon game. Mm-hmm. And yeah, when they get back to town, they can spend some money and go carousing. And I use the tables on the rocks, the carousing PDF on birchandbat.com.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's real good. There are character beats that my players have that are 100% from those roles.
Sometimes it can change the entire landscape of a place, literally. Mm-hmm. I had one game where I made an additional table because you guys were getting into some supernatural god stuff at the time. And so I had a god table I'd created.
Yeah.
And you guys completely devastated the entire world with like earthquakes and fires and all kinds of stuff, you know?
It was a time.
It was a time. But even something like that can completely change how a game runs.
Mm-hmm. But that's actually an interesting thing about, like, because we're talking about campaign settings that we've run. One cool way that you can flesh out a campaign world, even more so than just like the politics and the overall landscape and things like that, is the small details like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like being able to fill in the world with like down to earth moments of just like living and doing stuff, and how those kind of things flesh out the world.
Your entire story could be turned on its head by somebody going out to the market one day and things happening.
Yeah.
You never know what's going to happen. Like I love that part of it. Actually, most of my custom campaign things rely heavily on tables and small things that don't seem to matter, adding up to huge things that change the world.
Yeah.
I love it.
Random tables I think they're the backbone of a lot of our games.
Yeah, they are.
Like yours and mine together. Like, I love random tables for random encounters, for random setting details, for NPCs, for quests, and things like that. Because it always adds a new layer of something for players to interact with.
It does.
And, like, the more stuff you have, then the more you can sort of integrate it into your world, the more believable it becomes.
It does. I think in the game that you run for me, which is a completely overhauled Ravenloft game that doesn't even resemble original Curse of Strahd anymore, and I love it for that.
Oh yeah, it's gone. It has gone in some very interesting directions.
Like, we've used random tables a couple of times for that.
Yep.
Yeah. I don't know how you're the DM in that. I'm the player. I don't know how influential the table rules were.
For some of them they were. Usually the things that so one thing I do, because as you're often want to do, and as I know a lot of players are want to do, very occasionally you will go completely off the rails and decide, we're doing this today.
I'm sorry.
Or like, I'm going to wake up with my husband, Strahd von Zarevich, and we're just going to chat and hang out for a little while, and that's going to lead to some shenanigans.
You can never let Strahd and Priyana talk for more than 5 minutes. You can't do it.
Because he is a conquering general of an army in his past, so he has that mindset of like, he'll wake up in the morning, drink some blood, and then like a morning coffee, and then stand by his enormous map of the different domains and just brood over it like, Aslan Rex is still a problem for me. The missive clothes I saw from these things, but at the entire time, who knows what Falkovnia has been up to all this time.
My Priyana,
we should destroy them.
Priyana skips in with a basket full of muffins she just made. Hi, baby. We should call Aslan.
Well, that's the thing. One thing that I do is, and it served me really well for my world building and just like this campaign in general, instead of saying no, or instead of immediately being like yes and, or whatever sort of improv things some people rely on, I have reaction rolls.
Yeah, I love those.
If I'm not sure if a course of action will work or not, I roll a d20. And on a scale from 1 to 20, it determines how positive or negatively someone reacts to it. If it's a 20, they're all in 100% gung-ho about it. If it's a 1, it is something they oppose with every fiber in their being.
Yeah.
A 10, they're lukewarm about it.
Yeah.
Anytime I roll a 10, I usually re-roll it because, fuck that.
Fuck 10s.
That'll be a t-shirt at some point. It's like, man, that'll do.
Damn it.
But yeah, like there was a point where Priyana, your character, and Strahd were lamenting about Aslan Rex and him and Strahd's bad history together.
There was other things going on that was going on in his land, and it was work with Aslan Rex or try to do it on our own.
And on a lark, you decided to cast Sending and tried to basically just randomly dial up Aslan Rex, this immortal Lich King from another domain.
Strahd, you still have his number from college? Because maybe we can...
Basically, yeah. And yeah, like I rolled the dice and it was like, okay, he's there. Mm-hmm. Okay, here's how he reacts. And then he reacted positively to an idea.
He did.
And then very quickly, by the next session, he arrives in Barovia.
He did.
And that kicked off a huge arc of our campaign of like, well, I guess we're leaving Barovia. We got to settle some shit with the Raven Queen, so we're headed to the Shadowfell.
Yeah.
And we got to like sort of like work around to lick our elbow to sort of like move our way around to get there, but we're going to make it happen.
Taking Strahd von Zarovich and Aslan Rex to the Shadowfell. It was a great time.
Yeah.
Nothing bad happened.
But that's the thing, is that like I try not to run so tight a campaign or so tight a world that doesn't allow for a random spur of the moment decision that can have a lot of lasting impact.
Yeah. And I appreciate that. I appreciate you doing that.
It leads to a lot of like, okay, you gotta give me like 10 minutes just to talk amongst yourselves for a moment. I gotta do some very quick note taking. Hold on.
Browse Instagram for a while. I gotta fix this.
Why don't you go get yourself a snack, baby? I gotta quickly come up with an entire adventure in the next like 5 minutes.
There's always this moment when we're playing and Brianna and Strahd start talking and I have an idea and I watch your eyes get wide. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, oh, I just went off. I did it again.
You're outside the boundaries now.
I done did it again.
Yeah. But that happens. And like, here's what I will say. Because I write a lot and I prep a lot for that game. Usually the stuff that I come up with in like 10 minutes out of like something that you've come up with or an idea you've gotten fixated on, these usually end up being way more fun.
Oh yeah, that's like, in general. Yeah,
it's easy for me to get sort of stuck in my like a mindset of like, I've prepped this. These are the NPCs I have and how they need to sound, and here's the history behind them I need to keep in mind for this. When I get shaken out of that, usually I come up with something that's more fun. Yeah,
I mean, same. The longest running, it's been multiple parties, but the longest running campaign thing I've ever done is a take on Ravenloft, my own spin on the Curse of Strahd campaign. Mm-hmm. And I rely heavily on the choices of my players. I have a setting. I'm never going to run it again, so I can spill it all. I don't care. The concept of Curse of Strahd Sacred Seasons is that Barovia and Ravenloft in general and the Domains of Dread have been closed off to encompassing gods for a long time. Gods exist in those domains, but they kind of just chill. Mm-hmm. There isn't a whole lot, like, it's more the people who worship the gods doing things than the gods actually touching things. Like in Faerun, you can just straight up go to Tiamat. You could just do that.
She's just down there. You can like commune with her for a while. She's in her like hell prison or whatever.
Yeah, you can literally go to gods. You could feasibly defeat a god if you wanted to. Whereas in Ravenloft, the gods are much more in your head, so to speak. Like they exist, but they're more ethereal, you know? So the gods who are more physical are desperately craving more territory.
Yeah.
They're constantly fighting within their own territory. Well, time to expand. Let's look at other like domains. Let's look at other planes of existence. Well, Ravenloft has kind of an untouched area. Well, we need to get in somewhere. And 4 of them managed to get through those dark power mists that control the whole place. But in doing so, they've been stripped to their core and abandoned in Barovia just like everybody else. And these 4 gods are different every time I play it. Sometimes they're demons, like demon lords. Sometimes they're just secondary gods. It depends on what the worshipped gods of my players are going into the campaign.
Gotcha.
So I'll amass my players, take a look at what they believe, maybe influence a thing or two if I can. Like if I notice there's 6 gods and I can influence 2 of them to take the other gods of the other players, I'll do so. So that they can all have their gods that they all pull from, you know? Right. But how the game plays is entirely different. If I have Tymora fighting for something in one game, and Tymora is replaced by Orcus the next time, wildly different type of play.
Yeah.
Also, what they choose. Because sometimes they go in, like 2 of them are cultists worshipping Orcus from the start. But they don't like Orcus anymore, because Orcus is being a little shit, as he will.
Yeah.
And maybe then they start siding over here with Sloan instead. that completely shifts how the entire world plays.
Yeah, and this kind of change can happen not even within an entire campaign, but several times during a campaign.
Oh, completely.
Like I've played in this game a couple of times, and I've seen like switchovers where one god came into power, and like the entire landscape of the setting changed up because of that.
I have the Ravenloft has something baked into it called the Mists, which I've mentioned before. It encompasses Barovia and keeps people from coming in and out unless they will it. The Mists also have the power in my games and in many other settings that people use, that they can wash in like a giant blanket of fog, like in that movie The Mist with all the evil alien bugs in it.
Yeah,
just like that. They can wash in, and when they recede again, time has kind of reset itself to a certain sticking point of like when they first arrived, but everything around them has changed. And in my game, it reflects the choices they've made.
Yeah, it's like a setting reset that has sort of is baked into the setting, which is fun.
I've had a group, you were in that group, where you guys made a lot of choices that sided with Orcus, because he was an active, in quotations, god at the time. And my god, I kept throwing all these gods at you, and you guys really liked Orcus for some reason.
We all kind of fell into... that's the thing, like, I don't know how many of us actively sought out Orcus.
No.
I know my character was, just because, like, she had run afoul of him a bunch, and then sought him out in a moment of weakness and was like, okay, you're the only authority thing that I kind of am aware of that isn't also Strahd. So here we go, I guess. And yeah.
The more belief in my game, anyway, the more belief a god has behind it, like the more of the players support it, and the more it can gain the support of people to worship it within Barovia, the more power it gets. So you can restore one of these gods to full form, and they can take over Ravenloft, which is not good.
No, the way that they leave like the entire setting of Barovia from Curse of Strahd, when one of these shifts happens, like the Mists reset everything and there's a god in control now, it's like you get a custom themed version of Barovia, and it's usually bad.
I also theme them heavily, not even to the god, but just a theme.
Yeah.
Like, I had one where, who was it? One of the goddesses of the forest that I can't remember the name of from Forgotten Realms. I apologize. Sylvana, maybe? That's
something.
That's World of Warcraft.
That is World of Warcraft.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry for that. I can't. There's so many of them.
There's lots. Oh, Melora.
Melora. Thank you. One time they had a group side with Melora. Melora takes them. It suddenly becomes a lush forest. The castle itself becomes entangled in vines and all this kind of stuff.
Oh, hell yeah.
And then all of the major NPCs, I never switch out any Curse of Strahd NPCs. They are always there. Suddenly, they're all architects of fairy tales.
Oh, cool.
And so they go in and are like, okay, well, now we have to go back to, say, Vallaki, the main town, and solve the burgomaster's son's problem. Oh, he's Rapunzel now? Like...
You weave in fairy tales and stuff.
I weave in fairy tales with that one. The one with Orcus became the 7 Deadly Sins, where I made each different NPC a different deadly sin, and if they managed to get all the power, it would destroy the world. Yeah,
it was we were walking through like a version of it that became kind of like a purgatory.
Yeah, it was very purgatory-ish, because Orcus had taken hold. I've got one for the Raven Queen. I've got one where it becomes an eternal winter kind of scenario, and then... because everyone's so desperate, and this is not related to the Raven Queen whatsoever, I just thought it was fun, they all became very murderous.
Yeah.
And I based it all off of my weird, freaky obsession with actual serial killers.
Gotcha.
And so these players would come across these NPCs they knew from before, but some of these NPCs also had the persona of similar serial killers. Cool. And so every single party I've ever run this for went in a completely different buck wild direction.
I like that a lot. I mean, I think that's a huge step up from... Because whenever I make campaign settings and like homebrew worlds and stuff like that, the thing that is usually hardest for me is coming up with like a pantheon and like a creation myth of like, well, how did this world get started? Who's in charge? What are the gods? I've always kind of struggled with that.
That's where I thrive. I love doing pantheon things. Like I've been working low key on my own Pantheon for some time, and
Nice.
it's almost done. But that's been years in the making.
Yeah, I'm usually good at coming up with like one or two major religions in like a city or a country or something, and then coming up with a lot of like weird ass little cults and like little smaller like fledgling religions that sort of operate underneath that in the
Very
shadows.
cool. I like that a lot. That's pretty good.
Yeah. Let me see. I do have one other setting that I have currently that I'm running.
Yeah.
It's actually ties into some other stuff, not to plug things again.
No, plug it.
So I have a setting that I've used that is the sort of default setting of two adventures that are available on birchandbat.com. One is Peril of the Fat Prince, and the other is Ichor Knight.
Right.
This is a sort of homebrew setting I used for a little while. It's in and around an enormous sort of country-spanning city called the city-state of Invincia. It is just a giant city setting. Peril of the Fat Prince has a really big isometric map of a district of it. But massive city the size of a small country, tons of different districts within it, various kinds of faiths and politics and other things that can happen within it, and then a lot of like adventure sites sort of surrounding it. One thing that is a small sort of hallmark of it is that within the city and outside of the city, religion is there is sort of like a de facto sort of emperor, overlord kind of person that is in charge of the city, that is worshipped like a god. And then spread throughout that, there are a number of little competing cults and things of like different, they're closer to like demon lords or devils or monsters or things that people worship.
Yeah.
Similar to sort of like the old ones in like the Cthulhu mythos or something. And it's a setting I've gotten a lot of use out of.
That's awesome.
Like I've got the dungeon game that I'm running currently is set on the outskirts of that setting, way out in the Badlands. But it's a generic enough setting with just enough sort of like quirky personality built into it to make it feel more distinctive. So you can run it in your own setting and keep the bits that feel better to it, or you can run it on its own.
I love that.
Yeah, it is. As I add to it and I release more books and supplements on the site and everything for it, it's going to continue to slowly flesh out that world, I hope.
That's what I'm really excited for. I am so excited to see, like, say, like in 3 years, what that campaign world is going to end up looking like, just from what you've added to it.
Oh, yeah. Like, there are seeds left towards the end of Peril of the Fat Prince, which involves, like, a cult that you're sort of, like, pushing against to save the titular prince. There are details in that can spring off into other adventures and other things like that, depending on how you end that game. Like, there's multiple endings to that adventure. One of them completely reshapes the landscape because you failed in your quest and you ended up releasing a sort of aberrant deity onto the world. And, like, that can go south real fast. Suddenly the game becomes about, oops, we screwed up and we let loose a evil god. Now what?
I love it.
But yeah, there's some good stuff in there.
There's a lot of good stuff in there. Like, I'm honestly blown away every time you come out with one of these. I'm going to just gush about you.
Aww.
Can I just do that for a second?
I mean, sure.
Because every time you make one of these PDFs, I go over it as project manager. I read over these things, and I'm like, how does he do this?
I'd watched too many cartoons as a kid.
That's
I don't know.
a fair answer.
Listen. That's the thing, like, because a lot of people, it's like, wow, you're really creative. I'm like, I don't feel like I am. I've consumed a lot of media, and, like, I pick and choose from a lot of it, and I'm able to twist it up enough to make it feel unique.
Isn't that how Banksy got famous?
I mean, yeah.
There you go. If that's what my rule in life is, Kyle, if Banksy can do it, I can do it.
That's the rule to live by?
That's my rule.
I mean, that's not a bad rule, I guess.
It's a fine rule. It's fine.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, other than our own games, I don't know if I've made a lot of other, like, from like whole cloth sort of like completely homebrew settings.
I'm actually impressed by people who do, like, who from the ground up start with just one idea and flesh out the map, the landscape, the economics, all of it. Mm-hmm. That's so much work And I'm always so impressed by it.
It's a ton of world because I like to get in depth on some of it, but like not to the degree that I know a lot of other people. To all the Matt Mercers type people out there, and like the Griffin McElroys and stuff coming up with a lot of these things, you are amazing.
Absolutely,
and you have my utmost respect in this.
One day we'll be that good.
You think?
Maybe.
I don't know. I gotta publish that new fairy run vending machine.
Yeah. That would be cool. Okay, well, I'd say that was one hell of an episode.
Yeah, it sounds good.
Cool. So we will be back next week with, I don't even know what we're going to talk about next week. We'll talk about something next week.
Something with games. It's kind of what we talk about.
Games are good.
Yeah, but thank you for spending breakfast with us, everybody.
We hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and we will see you next week.
Thanks for listening to Breakfast with Birch and Bat. We're supported by our very own store that you can find at birchandbat.com. We have tabletop adventure PDFs, gaming supplements for your ongoing games, and RPG-themed shirts, stickers, phone cases, mugs, and even more. As always, thank you for all your support, and we will see you next week.